Everybody, welcome back to class. All right, we're hitting a few more mini topics here before I get into our first unit. The first unit we have coming up on the horizon, which I plan to be into by next week, will be space. We're going to be looking up at the stars and doing kind of a space unit that'll probably last a few weeks. But as I'm making kind of finishing touches and getting prepped for that, I'm going to throw a few more random topics at you this week. One that I wanted to talk about that seems to be blowing up in the news quite a bit, and I'm sure you're all to some degree kind of familiar with it, is social media. Now, we can go a lot of different directions with that. And actually, I'm titling this little video lecture notes. There's not a ton of material that you need to take notes on, but there is a few terms that I'm going to throw at you that I do expect you to know. And we might have an upcoming quiz, or some of this might be some exam questions at the end of the semester. So if you already have a little page of notes going on in a binder or spiral notebook or something like that, like I said, I think probably the whole semester we're looking at a couple pages at most of notes that I'd give you, but I'll have you add a couple more key terms into that. So you should have already had so far bias and tribalism, a working definition for those two things. We've talked about how tribalism seems to be becoming more extreme in recent times. That's something that's been around for really all of human history. I always remember, even back when I was a kid, pre-social media and all that, the country was tribal. There were Republicans and Democrats and gun owners and anti-gun people, et cetera, et cetera. There's all kinds of different tribes people can kind of fracture up into. But I definitely think, and I have a longer perspective than you guys. Because you really, I think, start paying attention to the world, maybe a little bit before 10 years old. By the time you're in, I don't know, first, second, third grade, that's when kids start to become more perceptive and they start noticing what's going on in the world outside of their own personal little bubble. For you guys, I mean, most of you are 15, 16, 17 years old. So, you're a decade max that you've really been paying attention, and social media has kind of been the norm, and people having smartphones and all that. That's just the world you've grown up in and been immersed in. So you've never known anything different. But I'm old enough, somebody who's pushing 40 years old, to remember a time before that existed, before the internet, or before at least it was a common thing that people used in their daily lives. And I've noticed a big change. I think most people my age and older have as well, that it seems like now I don't have any exact data that I could show you or stats that say social media is responsible for the increased level of tribalism. But I have noticed that tensions have gone up and we've become more tribal as social media, over the past decade, when social media has been, super common. So here's some of the notes that I want to give you. We're going to consider, and today I'm not giving you any assignment or anything to write down, but I do want you to think about these topics. I want you to view the other videos that I'm going to post in addition to my lecture notes today. And I just want you to start considering the questions that I'm going to ask you. So first up, though, we're going to look at it at a macro and a micro level. So those are two things that I'd want you to put in your notes. If you've had Mr. Haynes' econ class, those hopefully are familiar terms to you, because those are both econ terms. Macro, your definition for that would be at a very large scale. So if we're looking at the effects of social media on a macro level, we're looking at how does it affect the United States as a whole, society-wide, the whole culture, okay? So macro is big scale. Micro is the opposite of that. That's looking at the very small scale. That's looking at really small groups, or the individual. How does social media affect maybe you as an individual, or other individuals like you at the micro, really small level, okay? So two important terms there. I feel like it's definitely impacted America in a big way at the macro level, because you go back to when I was a kid, people had their political opinions and they were kind of tribal, and they'd break up into this faction or that. But most people got about a half hour of news a day. It was really common. There was 3, maybe if you consider like Fox, the old Fox over the airwaves, one of the big networks. Then you could say there's 4 like networks that your average American had access to. They all had the evening news at like 6 o'clock, I think, and it would go for, you'd get local news for a half hour, then national news for a half hour. So your average American got about an hour worth of news a day. If they were really tuned in and really wanted to stay up on stuff, they probably got an actual paper and print newspaper that they would read. But that was about it. Now, since smartphones have become super common, and at the same time smartphones came out, you had the companies, the tech companies developing apps that you would use on your smartphones. And of course, they came up with the social media apps and a lot of news apps. Around the same time, you had cable coming out with 24-hour news networks. Now somebody who's like kind of into politics, or maybe even not into politics, can get immersed by just these stories, just nonstop, 24 hours a day. It used to be, I remember like when I was a kid, people would complain about boredom all the time. Like, I got nothing to do. There's nothing good on TV. And I don't hear people saying that anymore. I feel like technology in a lot of ways has killed boredom for better or worse. Now I don't hear people complain about being bored that often. They might start to get bored, but usually if you do, what do? You got an instant boredom killer, like right in your pocket there that, bam, you just go open that up and you get onto whatever your favorite app, and often that's like a social media thing or maybe a video game or whatever, and that tunes you right in and sucks your attention. So know that the people that have designed these social media apps are some of the smartest, like IQ wise, smartest people on planet Earth, living out in Silicon Valley in California. They have absolutely, like, this is just not even debatable really, in order to make more money on it, they need you to spend more time on their app so that they can advertise and, like, promote things to you more. So they've absolutely designed them to be addictive, to try to get it so your behavior is compulsive. And anytime you have that down minute where you're not doing something else, you go right to that and you see, what's happening on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever the case may be. So I think it's changed our behavior that way, and it's immersed us in these stories and like the narratives that are playing out. And here's another key term I want you to put in your notes now. Echo chamber, ECHO, echo, and then chamber, ECHO. Now, what is an echo chamber? An echo chamber literally is like you go into like a cave or something and, you shout and you hear it echoing like, hello, 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 hello. That's what an echo is. But metaphorically, what we're talking about, how I'm using it in terms of social media, all of the major social media companies use these algorithms, these complicated like computer codes that essentially, in order to get you to stay on the app more or to check it more frequently, it tries to feed you things that appeal to you. It tries to show you what you want to see. So if you're a really conservative, pro-Trump, MAGA hat wearing, conservative type person, and everything that you're getting, when you get on Facebook and Twitter, you're following other conservatives and, friends of Trump, or you're liking everything that, these inflammatory, really conservative news stories, it's going to keep feeding that stuff to you. And conversely, it'll also show you things a lot of times that will like outrage you or be controversial to you. Now that sword cuts both ways. I use like the Trump person as an example, but it absolutely works in the opposite direction too. It really works in any direction you want. If you want to just sit around and watch kitten and puppy videos all day, well, it's going to keep feeding you kitten and puppy and adorable animal videos and stuff like that to keep you sucked in. So it's kind of like whatever you're interested in, whatever your natural disposition kind of starts, it's going to trap you in that track and try to suck you into it. And it's going to keep showing you things over and over. And that's part of why it's like so addictive. Now, I feel like I said, I don't have any like ironclad data to say that like social media is single-handedly responsible for the amount of tribalism we have in society today, and how another good term for you is America is very polarized. That'd be a good term to throw in as well. Polarized, 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 where it's like people are, if you look at that political spectrum of there's like left wing and right wing, and then there's the moderates in the middle, it's pushing people more and more to the extremes on both sides and really dividing America, which I think that's kind of a recipe for disaster too, because ideally in a democracy, in a republic like America is, you want more people willing to compromise, and you want people like looking at the other side like, you know what I mean? They might not agree with me, but they're my fellow countrymen, and we have more in common than we don't have in common. We have this kind of essential common like core tenets that we all agree on together. Where now I think like social media, the way that's just designed to kind of like polarize and inflame things and suck you in and just get you in your echo chamber. That's pushing us to the extremes, and it's making us look like, or making us think that the people on the other side that are not in my tribe, they're my enemy, rather than just like they're people I kind of disagree with on a few issues. So I feel like that's been very much responsible. The social media, there's a direct line, whereas that's become more common and more people have created accounts on social media sites and use them more frequently, that has led to the rise in tribalism. So I want you to think about that. Is social media responsible for the kind of the political tension, the polarization, and the really big divide in America? Is that responsible for it? Or is it like a lot of things and it's really complex and there's a whole bunch of factors and that's just one factor in the whole mix? I don't know. You think about that a little bit, and I am going to ask you some questions in the near future about it. So today, really, I'm not giving you an assignment, but I want you to think about that stuff. Next up, thinking about it at the personal level. How does social media impact you as an individual or other individuals like you? I have a couple, I think, kind of interesting videos, little news segments that I'm attaching that I want you to watch today. What the data that I've heard and what I've read has shown that actually, like technology in general, smartphones, they have a profound impact on everybody's mind. We still don't totally understand it at all. This is still being researched and not fully understood, but it really impacts adolescence because remember, your brain, the average human doesn't have a fully developed brain until they're about mid-20s. There is no exact date when everybody has an adult brain. For some people, it might be 22, 23. Other people, it might not be till 26, 27. But let's just say like just mid-20s roughly, your brain is going to be developing till then. So all of you watching this video, your brains are still developing. This is a time where, you're trying different things out. You're exploring different, like you should be exploring, different things in all walks of life and different philosophies and all that, and challenging your beliefs and really figuring out who you are as a person. And for most people, they kind of bounce around and they change a lot. And by the time they're probably like 30, that's when people get more like set in their ways. So you still have that developing brain at this age. And then when you mix that with like constant exposure, I mean, some kids are 10 hours a day or more where they're looking at a screen, that is going to have an impact on your brain and your development. So what they found, here's the research that I saw, that there seems to be kind of a difference in how technology is used and impacts adolescents, generally based on gender. Now, this is not an ironclad thing. And by gender, I'm talking about like boys and girls, male, female. All right. Now, it's not an absolute rule at all, because gender is kind of one of those things that maybe isn't always like as clear cut as we think, and people can be wired different ways, and there's a lot of nuance and shades of gray in the human brain. But in general, the research has shown that adolescent boys, they typically, what they gravitate to, most of them have social media accounts and get on there, but they like to play video games. They're really, really into the Fortnite, and I don't know what else is out there, but all the different video games. And I have two little boys at home, a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I can tell you, they're both totally addicted to video games. They would play them all day, every day if I'd let them. I see that, like it is highly addictive to them. So boys get impacted by like and that can lead to higher anxiety because you're frustrated because people aren't doing what they're supposed to on the game, and you get really competitive. But it also, there can be some positives to that, because in some of the games you're like doing team building and you're actually talking to other people, and you're like, you have a little bit of like social interaction with other humans. All right. Now, girls, females, on the other hand, typically I'm sure you can find a lot of examples of girl gamers out there that are playing games all the time. But in general, it's just an overarching kind of statistical rule. girls tend to gravitate more towards the social media, and they really like get into that. And you know, for all humans, you want to fit in and be part of a crowd. You want to be part of the tribe and accepted, whatever your tribe may be. So there's pressure to like conform and act a certain way because you want to get likes and retweets or, you know, favorites or whatever it is, if for any chosen app that you might be on. But you want to be accepted and you want to get that love. And like when you do get that, when you do get a lot of like favorites and retweets and boom, it's blowing up something you said, that gives you a dopamine burst in your brain. It makes you feel good and accepted and part of the crowd. The problem is, there's also a lot of shaming. There's a lot of negativity, and there's a lot of like ostracism and pushing people out and being rotten and mean and kind of catty. So they found that like girls are typically on average on the social media sites more, and that's having a big impact on their mood and state of mind. So something to kind of be aware of. And then another thing that's kind of a shocking trend, for years now, they've collected data on like depression and anxiety at people in different age levels. And depression and anxiety has gone up across the board, really for all age levels over the last 10 years or so. So maybe those phones and the social media and everything we're doing with technology is humans probably didn't evolve or weren't created, whichever your point of view is, to be on screens all the time. We were more, evolved to sit around the campfire and talk to other humans in our community and go out and be hunters and gatherers. And, that's what humans had been for a really long time. But of course, the world has totally changed. So where am I going with that? Well, it seems like the more we have been on screens, it's impacted both boys and girls. And girls, it seems like it's really boosted their depression and anxiety tremendously. Now, I don't have the numbers right on top of my head, but I am going to try to find those and eventually throw them out to you. Or it actually might be on one of the videos that I'm showing too. But like for female adolescents, it's shocking what like the suicide rates have gone through the roof from 10, 20 years ago. Just overall depression, anxiety have gone through the roof. Like that, of all the demographic groups out there, adolescent girls have been hit the hardest or the worst in terms of just like kind of overall mood and behavior. And it seems like that, even though there's not like a direct line that you can point it and blame it all on social media, it seems like that's the one thing, the one piece of the puzzle that's kind of changed in recent times and is likely leading to that. So here's the questions that I want you to just start considering today. Hopefully you watch through to the end. I want you, another key kind of term or concept for you is net positive or net negative. Okay, what do I mean by that? NET, net, and then positive or negative. So positive generally means good, negative means bad. I want you to think having the internet, having a smartphone, having social media, none of those things we can't say that they're all good or all bad. There's a lot of positives and a lot of negatives. It's a very complex situation. I want you to start thinking at the macro, the society level, and at the micro level, like in terms of just your life. Is social media and being immersed in like social media or those kind of sites, is it a net positive or a net negative? It can be both and it can be different. And this is a very complex answer, but I just want you to start thinking on that. And I'm going to have you share or talk on that or do a written response in the near future. Not 100% sure what yet, but that'll be coming up really soon, probably a journal entry tomorrow. So again, key questions today at the macro level and micro level is social media. At both of those levels, is it a net positive or a net negative? And the net means when you factor everything in, is it more good than bad or more bad than good? So I hope you get that concept. I'm sorry, I was kind of rambling there and going in different directions. All right. If you have any questions, because I know I do kind of get off on tangents and ramble a little bit, if any of this doesn't make sense or you're not sure what the key terms were that you needed to have, I'll put those in the notes of this section. But if you're unclear on anything, shoot me an email and I'll try to catch you up to speed. See ya.